Today, we're breaking down one of the most controversial developments on the world stage. It was announced in the snowy Swiss Alps, at the heart of the 2026 World Economic Forum in Davos, a place usually reserved for economists, CEOs, and world leaders quietly shaping the future behind closed doors. But this time, the announcement was anything but quiet. Former U.S. President Donald Trump took the global spotlight to unveil what he called a historic initiative, a new international body known as the Board of Peace. According to Trump, this board is designed to do what decades of diplomacy, summits and ceasefire agreements have failed to achieve: end centuries of conflict in the Middle East and fundamentally reshape how global diplomacy works. Supporters are calling it bold, critics are calling it dangerous, and the world is sharply divided. So what exactly is the Board of Peace? Trump described it as an independent international council made up of political leaders, military strategists, economists, and regional power brokers. Its mission, he says, is simple: force accountability, impose solutions, and bypass what he called failed global institutions. In his Davos speech, Trump argued that traditional diplomacy has become slow, weak, and ineffective, especially in regions plagued by long-term conflict. The world doesn't need more talk, he said. It needs results. But that message immediately raised alarms. European leaders questioned who would control the board and under what authority. Middle Eastern analysts warned that imposing peace from the outside has historically led to deeper instability. And human rights organizations expressed concern over transparency, enforcement powers, and the potential use of economic or military pressure. At the center of the controversy is one key question: who decides what peace looks like, and who pays the price for it? Trump insists the Board of Peace would prevent wars, stabilize global markets, and reduce migration crises by addressing conflict at its source. Opponents argue it could undermine national sovereignty and escalate tensions rather than resolve them. What's clear is this: the announcement has already changed the conversation. In Davos, where diplomacy is usually cautious and calculated, this proposal landed like a thunderclap. Whether the Board of Peace becomes a turning point in world history or another failed experiment in global power remains to be seen. But one thing is certain: the debate has begun. The lines are drawn, and the world is watching closely. The Board of Peace was formally announced at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, by former U.S. President Donald Trump, and it's already sparking global debate. The initiative is being described as a new international organization, one designed to tackle global conflict and jumpstart reconstruction in regions devastated by war. Its first focus, the Gaza Strip. According to official statements from the White House, the Board of Peace would play a central role in coordinating peace and reconstruction efforts, particularly in Gaza, where years of conflict have left infrastructure shattered and humanitarian conditions dire. The board's stated goals include coordinating peace and post-war reconstruction efforts, providing strategic oversight in unstable regions, mobilizing international financial and political resources, and ensuring long-term stability after conflict. Officials say the board is intended to work in conjunction with the United Nations. However, what that partnership would look like in practice, who holds authority, who makes decisions, and who enforces outcomes, remains unclear. Speaking in Davos, Trump described the Board of Peace as a very unique initiative. He argued that it would not only rebuild societies after war, but also succeed where traditional diplomacy has failed by resolving conflicts around the world more decisively. Supporters see the proposal as ambitious and overdue, claiming existing international institutions are too slow, too divided, and too constrained by politics to respond effectively to modern conflicts. But critics aren't convinced. Some question whether the Board of Peace is truly about peace, or whether it represents a broader power move to reshape global governance. Concerns have been raised over transparency, legitimacy, and the potential sidelining of existing international frameworks. Others warn that concentrating influence in a new loosely defined body could deepen tensions rather than ease them. At the heart of the debate is a familiar question. Can peace be engineered from the top down, or does it risk repeating the mistakes of the past? For now, the Board of Peace remains a proposal filled with bold promises and unanswered questions. What's clear is that its announcement in Davos has already sent ripples through diplomatic circles worldwide. Whether it becomes a cornerstone of future peace efforts or a controversial experiment in global power will depend on what comes next. The idea behind the Board of Peace didn't appear overnight. It traces back to September 2025, when Donald Trump introduced a sweeping 20-point peace plan for Gaza, aimed at ending the decades-long conflict between Israel and Hamas. At the time, the proposal was framed narrowly, focused on ceasefire enforcement, reconstruction, and a pathway toward long-term stability in Gaza. Soon after, momentum appeared to build. A United Nations Security Council resolution, known as Resolution 2803, welcomed the creation of a transitional body intended to support reconstruction and governance in Gaza. To many observers, this signaled cautious international approval, at least in principle. But here's where the story takes a turn. Although the initiative was publicly marketed around Gaza, the 11-page charter signed in Davos tells a different story. The document does not explicitly mention Gaza at all. Instead, it lays out a far broader and more ambitious vision, one that effectively establishes the foundation for a new global institution with authority extending well beyond a single conflict zone. In simple terms, the evolution looks like this. What began as a Gaza-focused peace mechanism was launched as a global peace and conflict organization. That shift or expansion has triggered debate around the world. Supporters argue this was always the end goal, to create a flexible framework capable of responding to conflicts anywhere, not just in the Middle East. Critics, however, see it differently. They question whether the global mandate represents mission creep or a strategic move to reshape how international peacekeeping and post-war governance are handled outside traditional systems. The lack of explicit geographic limits in the Charter has raised concerns about oversight, accountability, and long-term authority, and it leaves one central question unanswered. Is the Board of Peace an evolution of diplomacy or the beginning of a parallel global power structure? As governments, analysts, and international organizations examine the fine print, one thing is clear. This is no longer just about Gaza. It's about the future of how peace is defined, who enforces it, and who gets to decide where and how it applies. On January 26, 2026, former President Donald Trump presided over a highly anticipated signing ceremony in Davos, Switzerland. Holding the Charter of the Board of Peace, Trump positioned the new institution as a groundbreaking body designed to combat violence across continents. In his remarks, he repeatedly referenced the ongoing conflict in the Middle East, saying the Israel-Hamas war is really coming to an end. He minimized remaining tensions as little fires, suggesting the board itself could extinguish them. Trump went further, claiming the board could eventually do pretty much whatever we want to do. Those remarks immediately sparked debate and speculation. Could this organization operate beyond Gaza? Could it even rival the influence of existing institutions, including the United Nations? Despite the ambitious rhetoric, key practical details remain unclear. Questions about funding, enforcement powers, and operational logistics are still unanswered. The signing ceremony drew the attention of world leaders and diplomats, yet few have publicly committed to supporting the initiative. For now, the Board of Peace stands as a bold vision, one promising global impact, but leaving more questions than answers. Whether it will become a transformative force in international diplomacy or another controversial experiment in global governance remains to be seen. One of the most talked about and controversial aspects of the Board of Peace is its membership model. According to Trump's team, countries that want permanent membership would need to meet a $1 billion financial threshold. Critics have been quick to voice concerns, calling it a pay-to-play model arguing that influence is being bought rather than earned through diplomatic cooperation. Here's how the proposed system is supposed to work. Countries can join the board without paying, but only on a temporary basis, typically for 3-year terms. To become a permanent member, nations are expected to contribute at least $1 billion to support the board's mission. Those funds are intended for reconstruction and peace efforts, though the specifics of how the money will be allocated remain unclear. This approach has raised eyebrows in capitals across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, particularly among nations that value equal representation and worry about unbalanced influence in a global peacekeeping body. As the plan moves forward, the debate is intensifying. Can financial power determine global influence, or should diplomacy remain the ultimate currency? The Board of Peace promises bold goals, but the questions about fairness, transparency, and accountability may prove just as significant as its ambitions. Despite former President Trump's claim that everyone wants to be part of this, the global reception to the Board of Peace has been decidedly mixed. Some countries, including Hungary and Vietnam, are reported to have accepted invitations. Others, like India, Australia, and several major European powers, have not publicly joined the initiative. Meanwhile, several Western European nations have explicitly declined or expressed hesitation, particularly over concerns that the board could undermine the United Nations. Even major global players have approached the proposal cautiously. Reports suggest Russia may condition its participation on the release of frozen assets, turning the board not just into a diplomatic platform, but a geopolitical bargaining chip. This uneven buy-in highlights a central tension. Is the Board of Peace a true reflection of shared global leadership or a US-led alliance with selective partners? As the world watches, the initiative's promise of global peace is being measured against the realities of international politics, competing interests, and cautious diplomacy. The Board of Peace may be ambitious, but its success could hinge as much on who chooses to participate as on what it actually accomplishes. While world leaders gather in the snow-covered Swiss Alps, talking about peace and transformative initiatives, life on the ground in Gaza remains a stark contrast. Despite a fragile ceasefire and repeated international pledges, Palestinians in Gaza continue to face extreme hardship. Cold winter conditions, shortages of basic necessities, and sporadic violence make daily life a struggle. Many residents are reportedly forced to scavenge through refuse for warmth, highlighting the profound human toll of years of conflict. This reality stands in sharp contrast to the high-flying rhetoric coming out of Davos, where the Board of Peace was formally announced by former President Donald Trump on January 22, 2026, at a widely covered signing ceremony. Trump held the board's charter and described the initiative as a groundbreaking institution destined to combat violence across continents. Trump repeatedly minimized the ongoing Israel-Hamas conflict as little fires, implying that the board itself could extinguish them. In his remarks, he even claimed the board could eventually do pretty much whatever we want to do, sparking questions about its scope and potential to rival existing institutions like the United Nations. Yet despite the grand vision, key practical details remain unclear. Questions about funding, enforcement powers, and operational logistics have not been fully answered. While the summit drew the attention of world leaders and diplomats, few have committed publicly to the initiative. One of the most controversial aspects of the Board of Peace is its membership model. Trump's team has proposed a $1 billion financial threshold for countries seeking permanent membership. Temporary membership would still be possible for nations joining without payment, typically on 3-year terms, but critics have called the system a pay-to-play model, arguing that it prioritizes money over merit and diplomatic cooperation. This approach has raised concern in Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, especially among nations that value equal representation and fear unbalanced influence in a global peacekeeping body. Even the allocation of funds for reconstruction and peace efforts remains vague, leaving many observers skeptical about the board's actual capacity to deliver on its promises. Global participation so far has been uneven. Some countries, like Hungary and Vietnam, are reported to have accepted invitations. Others, including India, Australia, and several European powers, have yet to publicly join. Several Western European nations have explicitly declined or expressed hesitation, citing concerns that the board might undermine the United Nations. Even major global powers are treading cautiously. Reports indicate Russia could condition its participation on the release of frozen assets, making the board not just a diplomatic initiative, but a potential bargaining chip in global politics. This uneven buy-in raises a central question. Is the Board of Peace truly a reflection of shared global leadership or a US-led alliance with selective partners? The history of the board also adds context. Its roots trace back to September 2025, when Trump proposed a 20-point peace plan for Gaza as part of efforts to end decades of conflict between Israel and Hamas. A United Nations Security Council resolution, 2803, later welcomed the creation of a body aimed at supporting reconstruction and governance in Gaza. However, the 11-page charter signed in Davos does not explicitly mention Gaza. Instead, it lays out a broader vision, establishing the foundation for a global peace and conflict organization. What began as a Gaza-focused initiative has evolved or expanded into a proposal with worldwide ambitions, drawing both admiration and criticism. Critics argue that while the board's narrative emphasizes reconstruction, governance and peace, the lived experience of civilians tells a different story. On the ground, systemic problems remain deep and entrenched, and global summits alone cannot fix them. Estimates suggest that reconstruction in Gaza alone could cost tens of billions of dollars, meaning the board will need far more than symbolism to make a tangible difference. As world leaders continue to debate its role, the Board of Peace stands at a crossroads. Will it become a transformative institution capable of shaping the future of conflict, resolution, or will it be remembered as an ambitious but largely symbolic venture? For the people in Gaza, the answers cannot come quickly enough. While discussions in Davos unfold, civilians continue to live in uncertainty, facing harsh conditions and daily survival challenges. The gap between diplomatic ambition and on-the-ground reality remains stark, a reminder that peace is as much about concrete action as it is about declarations and charters. The coming months will be critical. Observers will be watching not just who joins the board, but whether it can translate vision into impact, turning the lofty ideals announced in Davos into real-world solutions that make life safer and more stable for those who need it most. The Board of Peace has sparked a major debate about the future of international diplomacy. Some are asking, could it become an alternative to the United Nations? Or will it simply serve as another forum where powerful nations advance their own interests? And when it comes to its $1 billion membership threshold, critics are asking, does that buy influence, access, or a shared global strategy? Supporters of the board describe it as a bold new vision for a fractured world, one designed to cut through bureaucratic gridlock and tackle conflicts that traditional diplomacy has struggled to resolve. They argue that an agile, well-funded institution could bring much-needed coordination, reconstruction, and peacekeeping to regions in crisis. Detractors, however, are more cautious. They warn that the board risks creating a parallel diplomacy system, one driven by wealth and political leverage rather than genuine collective action. Critics argue that this approach could favor richer nations, potentially sidelining smaller countries and undermining existing frameworks like the UN. The coming months will be critical. The board's future depends largely on how major powers respond. The European Union, China, Russia, and emerging economies all have the potential to shape whether this initiative survives, evolves, or fades into diplomatic history. At its core, the debate over the Board of Peace is about more than just one organization. It reflects broader questions about global governance in the 21st century. who gets to make decisions, how power is exercised, and whether new institutions can truly deliver peace without reinforcing old hierarchies. As the world watches, one thing is clear: the Board of Peace has raised more questions than answers, but those questions may determine the future of diplomacy for years to come. So what does the Board of Peace really represent? Is it a step toward lasting peace in some of the world's most embattled regions? Or is it a power play on the global stage, designed to shift influence and control among major nations? The truth likely lies somewhere in between. The board reflects a bold, ambitious vision, but one that exists at the intersection of diplomacy, geopolitics, and the practical realities of conflict. Its promises are clear: reconstruction, coordination, and peacekeeping. Its potential risks are equally evident: concentration of power, unequal influence, and the creation of a parallel global system that could challenge existing institutions, like the United Nations. As nations wrestle with competing visions for global governance, one point stands out: peace is not only negotiated in the halls of summits and international meetings, it is lived every day by the families, communities, and individuals caught in the crossfire of conflict. From Gaza to other regions plagued by instability, civilians continue to endure hardship, uncertainty, and danger long before charters are signed or funds allocated. No amount of rhetoric can replace the human impact, and critics caution that global summits cannot alone resolve structural problems on the ground. Yet supporters insist that frameworks like the Board of Peace are necessary to break diplomatic gridlock, offering a coordinated mechanism that could respond faster and more decisively than existing systems. The 1 billion membership threshold, permanent versus temporary seats, and ambitious global scope all underline the board's intent to reshape how peace is pursued internationally. But whether this vision will succeed depends heavily on participation and buy-in from the world's major powers. The EU, China, Russia, and emerging economies all have the ability to determine whether the board becomes a transformative force or fades into history as an ambitious but ultimately symbolic initiative. For now, the story is far from over. The Board of Peace has sparked debate, scrutiny, and speculation, drawing attention to both the potential and pitfalls of 21st century diplomacy. As the world watches, one thing is clear: the way nations attempt to create peace is evolving. Bold initiatives like this bring hope, but they also raise critical questions about fairness, influence, and the true meaning of global cooperation. In the end, the Board of Peace may redefine how the world approaches conflict, but its ultimate measure will not be in announcements, charters, or headlines. It will be measured in lives touched, conflicts resolved, and communities rebuilt. Stay tuned, because this story is far from finished. And it could very well reshape how the world tries to make peace. Thanks for watching.